Yeah, well, in fact, we did a lot during those years. I can remember being in government when we sent commissioners into Rotherham to take over the local authority there. That was the accumulation of a spiral of problems, a spiral of silence, if you like, and fundamentally not believing the victims of these terrible crimes. If you remember, Kay, 10 or so years ago, we were still really grappling with a culture where young women were just not being taken seriously. They were being stigmatized themselves as somehow involved or complicit with this behavior, and their evidence just was being marginalised. Now, I think that culture is changing. I think we've still got a way to go. I can remember doing cases, our Solicitor General, in the latter part of the decade, where I was talking about making sure that where you had Asian or South Asian gangs targeting white victims, that the courts uplifted the sentences because, frankly, there was a racial element to that criminality. Of course, it cuts, I think, always. This isn't something that's all about just one ethnic group. It should cover everybody. And the important message was being sent out by me and others that abuse is abuse. There's no excuse for cultural reasons, so-called cultural reasons, to get in the way of what is child abuse, plain and simple.
Yeah, but having said that, I know that the Prime Minister is going to be banging on about political correctness later on. But, if you look at the figures, there are more white men than Asian men that are responsible for the grooming of young people.
Yeah, well, that's why I said that this cuts all ways. I think it's wise, Kate, to focus on the victims themselves, to make sure that predominantly young women are being listened to, are being supported, and that their evidence is being taken seriously. And that was the heart of the problem some years ago in the communities that we are well familiar with. In an age where evidence can be taken by pre-recorded means, by even cross-examination now done in a pre-recorded way, victims of crime must know that their voice will be heard, that they will be taken seriously, and they won't be marginalised because of who they are, where they've come from. A young girl in care, her voice is just as important as anybody else's in our society, and it needs to be heard in order to expose some of the horrific criminality that we see in the form of these organised grooming gangs.
Just another thought on this, if I may, and then I have other topics to discuss with you. Suella Braverman apparently said that Labour turned a willful blind eye to grooming gangs when they were in power. Lisa Nandy, the Shadow Levelling Up Secretary, yesterday called Ms Braverman a joke for saying that. Do you think she overstretched there?
Well, look, I think that everybody needs to take responsibility for perhaps a time when there were so-called cultural sensitivities that were predominating and taking precedence over the need to follow the evidence wherever it leads. I think all of us should take responsibility for that. I think there was a problem. I mean, Rotherham was years and years of problems being piled upon each other, which began long before 2010.
Was that Labour's fault? Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, I don't think we should make this a party political thing, frankly. I think we should be focusing on the victims of crime, recognising that there have been times in our past where, for whatever reason, cultural sensitivities have been put first and foremost, and that's wrong. Abuse is abuse. We should call it out wherever it comes from and whoever does it. And that we need to listen to the victims of crime and make sure they're supported. That's always been my approach. Follow the evidence and follow it to wherever it leads without fear or favour.
What's to blame for the queues at Dover, do you think?
Well, I think, from my layman's eye looking on, it does seem that there's a confluence of issues. I think that there's no doubt that some of the increased checks that now are necessary since we left the EU will be a part of that. I think that all the authorities on both sides of the channel, both the French and the British authorities, have to work even harder to make sure that those short straits are working as effectively as possible at times of maximum pressure. It should be no surprise to anybody that we've hit the Easter holiday season. We're going to have lots of school parties, we're going to have lots of families wanting to travel, and it does seem to me to be somewhat of a problem here that this particular backlog was allowed to grow. I gather that things have eased somewhat overnight, but putting myself in the shoes of those families and businesses, it must have been horrendous over the last few days, and the authorities have got to work even harder to make sure that we minimise repeats of this type of blockage.
While I have you, I wonder if I might be able to ask you about a review that you're launching into autistic people at work. Could you tell us any more about that?
Yes, yesterday I launched a review. It's an independent review, but it's on behalf of the government to look at the obstacles which stand in the way of far too many autistic people in order to get jobs. Only about 2 out of 10 adults, autistic adults, are in employment at the moment. I think that's a ridiculously low figure, bearing in mind the potential of people with autism. We're going to be working with business, with industry, to identify best practice, to work out the best ways in which obstacles to the recruitment and retention of autistic people can be overcome. And I'm looking forward to working with the government and indeed with the charity sector and indeed with the wider economy in order to release the potential of autistic people. This isn't just a morally right case, Kay. This is good for our economy, good for productivity, and an important part of reducing so-called economic inactivity that is a real issue that is concerning the government at the moment. So I'll be working on that through the summer, and I'm looking forward to the tasks ahead.
I wonder if you've seen the front page of the Daily Mirror today. If not, Suella Braverman has claimed nearly £25,000 in 5 years for her London home while living rent-free with her parents when not there. Now, it's not against the rules, but it's stretching them to the absolute limit, especially when people are struggling so much to try and pay their bills at the moment. What would you say about that?
Okay, I hadn't seen that headline. I don't know the facts of that case. I don't think I can comment without knowing any more, I'm afraid.
Well, I can tell you that her people have agreed that has indeed been the case. They offered a defence, as you would expect. But, I mean, the optics are not good when something like that happens, are they?
Well, I think all of us in public life, when we have the privilege of representing people in Parliament, have a duty to make sure that we spend taxpayers' money as wisely as possible. MPs have offices to run. I think people accept that needs to be run properly with supporting staff. I for instance, share accommodation in London with another MP, try and keep costs down. I think all of us need to be very mindful of the fact that at this time of pressure for many families, we should do our bit to keep costs as effective as possible and as low as possible.